Let's turn now to Patrick Gathara. He's a writer, columnist and international affairs commentator in Nairobi. Patrick, thank you very much for your time. This really is an Odinga versus Ruto fight, isn't it? Tell us about these two candidates and who you think might win.
Well, thanks for having me. Odinga is a long-term campaigner for democracy in Kenya. He's the son of the first vice president in Kenya, and he's suffered a lot for his stance against the dictatorships that have ruled the country since the 60s. However, in this particular election, he's actually running as with the support of the current regime. So he's not really considered by many as an outsider. William Ruto, who is the current deputy president, and has been for the last 10 years, is himself running as the outsider, as the agent of change, since he fell out with President Uhuru Kenyatta in 2018 after Kenyatta and Raila got together to pretty much form a coalition. In terms of who's going to win, I think that it's too early to tell. It's a very close race. The polls running up to now have not indicated that any of them would get the required 50% plus one to avoid a runoff. So it's likely that even if we get results tomorrow, we might still be in for yet more electioneering, yet more voting in the days to come.
Of course, Tuesday's vote is seen as a key test of stability in a nation regarded as a healthy democracy, more or less, in a region known for long-serving dictators. But there are questions around whether the loser will actually accept defeat. Tell us about this uncertainty that's been laced in Kenya's election history.
Well, elections since '92 and the return of multi-party democracy have always been disputed. If you think of the 2017 election, that was actually contested in court and was annulled. So there is a history of candidates not accepting defeat, contesting results, sometimes violently. In this particular case, both of them are more or less committed to accept the results. But the proof is in the pudding. It's still the results actually do come out. I personally think whoever loses will probably end up challenging the results in court. It's unlikely that they would go the route of violence, as we saw in 2007, because back then the courts weren't really credible. They were seen as lackeys of the state. But now, especially following the annulment of 2017, I think there's much more confidence that if there's trouble with how the election is conducted, that the courts wouldn't hesitate to reverse it and to order a fresh election.
But do you think this confidence is instated in the people who are actually voting? The Electoral Commission estimated voter turnout at 60%. That's a huge drop from the 80% that turned out in 2017. What is it, behind people's lack of confidence in showing up to vote?
Well, we've got to think of this historically. Prior to the 2010 Constitution, elections really got above 70% turnout. 60% would still be much lower than that, but it seems to me like they've been dropping. You think the 2013 election had an 85% turnout, and then it went down to 80, and it looks like it's dropped to 60. I think for me it speaks a lot about the value that people put in elections. I think prior to the Constitution that we put in 2010, there wasn't much hope that actual voting would change much. I think that would account for why there wasn't so much sort of enthusiasm to participate. After that, we saw a spike in that, but it doesn't seem to be sustained, because people still think it's the same set of characters that keep coming in and going out, and that policies don't actually change. The people's standard of living doesn't really seem to be affected by whoever comes into office. So I think this kind of reflects a kind of disillusionment
Right.
with elections as a path to change.
Unemployment is rife with, of course, the pandemic and supply chain issues impacting the whole country right now, as it is much around the world. But do you think this election is seen as a referendum on President Kenyatta's economic legacy?
I think it's the truth is that's what Ruto would want because it would favor his appeal to his supporters. Basically, they would like to turn it into a referendum on Kenyatta. And to paint Raila Odinga essentially as a project or a continuation of the Kenyatta regime. I do think that in reality there is an element in which this election is looking back, and it's and people are saying, well, we're not happy with how things are. But I think much more than that, it's also about looking forward and about saying that the current system, whoever was to take power, simply isn't set up to solve problems of people. That it is much more about the politicians. And I think when you see people staying away from it, especially the youth, I mean, the proportion of youth among registered voters fell from 51% to 38%. And this in a country where 3/4 of the population is below the age of 35. So it's a really massive statement, I think, by young people that basically the country does not work for them, and that there's really, whoever wins, I think, will really need to work hard to get a mandate, to get legitimacy from the people who stayed away.
Now, the public opinion states that people in Kenya believe that Kenya has borrowed too much money from China, but both Odinga and Ruto have differing approaches to relations with China. How might these results impact Kenya-China ties, do you think?
Well, while they do make a lot of rhetoric about debt and about Chinese debt in particular, I don't really think any of them are going to make much changes to it. To be quite honest, as I said, Ruto has been in office in 10 years. As the debt has ballooned, he's been part of the regime that was borrowing. And obviously Odinga getting the support of Kenyatta is not really seen as somebody who's going to go and rock the boat. So I suspect that whoever comes into office will continue along this path. There'll probably be a slowing down in the uptake of debt, but given all the promises that are being given about projects and infrastructure and stuff, I don't think that we'll see too much of a slowdown in borrowing. They will need the money, in essence, to fulfill what they've promised.
All right, Robert, really appreciate your time. Robert Nagula there. Thank you very much.